Hi, Rosie. Thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Andy.
So, we've been trying to plan this in for a little while, and you've been working on a behemoth of a project, and it's taken us well over a year, I think, at least a year, to kind of get to a point where we're ready to record, and you've got this incredible case study to bring and talk about, which I'm so excited to go into the detail of. And actually, I knew that it was a really interesting project, and I knew obviously that it looked amazing. And I'm sure lots of our listeners as well know you, but maybe for some of those who don't, Rosie, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and Allan and Arch Investments?
Yeah, of course. So we're a husband and wife team, myself and Alan. We're based in Kent. We're Arch Investments for anyone who knows us off Instagram. Um, Based in Kent, have invested primarily in the Northwest for the last 4 years. Alan is still in his day job and plans to stay in the day job. I left mine. I worked in HR for a local charity, and I left that in January, just this year, because of this beast of an HMO that we're going to go on to talk about.
And was kind of leaving work and transitioning into property, is that a goal you had for a long time, Rosie?
So since we started 4 years ago, yes, the idea was to replace my salary. Alan always set this goal of you can't leave your job until we replace that salary. So that was really it. And with managing this HMO, I couldn't have stayed in the day job working full time. It's juggling that. I know some people do it, and incredible, hats off to them. I just don't know how they manage it.
Well, interestingly, and we kind of just briefly touched on this before we hit record, didn't we? Your case study, which is obviously going to be inside the roadmap for everybody to read, all our members to read. It's the first time I've read a case study from any of our community members who have said that they don't actively plan on doing much more in the HMO space. And I said, I'm really keen to ask you about this because you are the first person that has said that to me. First person that's been brave enough to say that to me, Rosie. But I'm really interested to find out why. So I don't know yet whether it's because this project was such a challenge, whether there's something else there, but we're going to come back onto that because I'm really interested in talking about it.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about this beast of a project. It's a 12 bed that took you, it was a bit of a roller coaster journey.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a chat about, I'm really keen to find out about how you got to this HMO in the first place. And I suppose the first place I want to start today is, and knowing that you've already said that you're not that enthusiastic about, really doing a lot more in the HMO space. Why did you decide to invest in HMOs in the first place? And you already had, an established buy-to-let portfolio that was working. So why did you decide to get into HMOs in the first place?
So we didn't actually decide to get into HMOs. We had no intention of going down that route. I had decided to do a leaflet campaign. I'd been taught on our property training that we did a couple of years previous that we needed to do these direct to vendor campaigns. So off I went, wrote my little handwritten letter, sent it off to 3,000 houses, which I thought were going to be great for buy-to-lets. And I get a phone call from a bloke who owns a building that's got 4 flats in it, 340 metres squared. I was like, oh, I think I might have flied the wrong streets here. This isn't quite what I was looking for. So yeah, that's how it came about in the first place. No intention of going down the HMO route, but when it lands in your lap, sometimes you just have to say yes.
Well, I guess the activity creates opportunity, and I suppose that begs the question: why were you doing direct to vendor then? Obviously, you mentioned you'd done some training,
Yeah.
and I do a lot of direct to vendor, and I'm really targeted about it. We target HMO landlords. We're really actively looking for those HMO properties.
Yeah.
Who are you targeting, Rosie, and why were you doing it? And was this the only project that you found a deal, or is this actually in direct to vendor something that's worked for you previously and continues to work for you?
So we were doing it because on the market, I mean, it's a lot worse now, but 4 years ago, it was still hard to find a good buy-to-let deal. We were looking to do the BRR model, pull as much money out as possible. So we'd had experience in direct to vendor, even even through properties that were on the market, we'd managed to meet the vendor and build that relationship, and that rapport was everything. So that's why we thought, okay, let's try and do that. We were targeting little 2-3 bed properties, and we were told you need to do lots of them. So we weren't picking off houses. I was picking off areas, and I just highlighted a few different areas for this company to go and do. Their minimum order quantity was 3,000, so I did 3,000. That was it. Not much more thought to it than that. And we had loads of calls, loads and loads of calls. Some people telling me that I was a scam artist and that they could see my letter was not actually handwritten, that I'd photocopied it, which was interesting. But lots of people who were looking to sell their house. At the time, it was really hard. I was working full time. It was really hard to pick the phone up. I'd got one of these idiot phones, as people call them. So it was ringing constantly, which was great, but I didn't have the time to pick it up. So when I was getting home from work, I was going through all the voicemails, trying to call people back. So really, I should be doing that now. Now I have the time to answer the phone. Now I'm not working so much. But our strategy's changed slightly since then. So yeah.
It's interesting to hear you talk about direct vendor, because you're so right. It's not just about the letters and the leaflets and making them work. Actually, there's a sequence of events that's got to be able to happen, and that includes the very real and practical requirement to answer the phone. And one of the other things that I think a lot of people forget is, a lot of people, before they pick up the phone and call, will actually go and check out the details, and make sure someone's legit. So, I don't know what your leaflet said, and maybe it just said Rosie and Allan at the end and there was no website, but sometimes when you're putting that sort of information on there, people will probably go and check it out. And then the website and social media and that kind of rabbit warren that we're all used to going down when we check most companies out, if we're seriously thinking about speaking to somebody. If something doesn't look quite right, or something doesn't support what something else is saying, it's a bit of a yellow flag, and then sometimes people don't call. But what's great to hear is that and I think this is the single most important thing with leaflets, and the first kind of key priorities is just getting people's attention. If people just pick it up and take notice, then that's an absolute win. And if they pick up the phone and call, that's great. But one thing, and I don't know what you think about this, but with direct to vendor, a lot of it's about timing. We're carpet bombing people, and this happens to you and I, doesn't it? And lots of our listeners, we get loads of stuff through the mailbox, and sometimes we don't need it. But sometimes I get the check a trade thing come through, and most months I just put it in the bin because I don't need it. And what I should do is put it on the wall and keep it, but I don't. It goes in the bin, and then all of a sudden I need something like a window cleaner, and it's having that there is really useful. And timing, I think, is everything. And when we're looking at properties as well, we're not likely to convince someone to sell their house today or tomorrow by sending them this shiny leaflet. But actually, if we send it at the right time, just as they're considering already selling it, or if we keep selling it and then maybe in 2 or 3 months' time their circumstances change, they decide to sell, maybe that's sometimes when they call. But I'm a big fan of direct to vendor, and I'm really pleased to hear that it worked and works for you. And I still think it gets a bit of a bad rep, but I still think if it's done the right way, it can work really, really well.
Absolutely, and it is a bit of luck, but if you take enough action, you get lucky, and that's it, isn't it? So that's what we did. We thought 3,000. Let's see what we get. We got this one gem. Pretty good odds.
So you guys are based in Kent.
Yeah.
The Garden of England, I think. And this project was it's in the northwest, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
Is your other stuff in the northwest, Rosie? Have you been investing, closer to home in the past?
Most of our portfolio is in the northwest. Our old home, we turned into a buy-to-let that is in the southeast, and we're now focusing our efforts more on the southeast. But yeah, pretty much all of our portfolio is up there.
Was that a really active decision to try and get the most out of your investment and what you were investing in your properties?
Yeah, well, we found it was a bit of a gold mine area. And so we kept mining. Now lots of people know about the Wirral. We stumbled across it because lots of people going to Liverpool. So we sort of followed the crowd, went to Liverpool, didn't like it, too many investors. I'm not the best with the Scouse accent, to be honest. My poor builder, I'm on the phone going, sorry, what? So yeah, we moved over the water to see if we could make it work over there. It was only a little drive over there, and we really liked the people. They had time for us. Over in Liverpool, they didn't have time for us. There was too many investors, so we focused our efforts over there, and it worked. We found these little buy-to-lets. So we kept going. Now it is flooded with investors, so don't go to the Wirral if you're listening. And lots of people doing HMOs as well. There's lovely big Victorian buildings, high ceilings, huge rooms, that work well for HMOs. It doesn't always mean the area is the best for them, just because the houses suit it.
Fundamentally, you need the tenant supply, don't you?
Exactly.
It's got to be there. And for anyone listening who doesn't know the Wirral, it's on a large part, a really beautiful part of the northwest. Around the side of Liverpool, and but it's not where the universities are of Liverpool. It's when you think Liverpool, you think Liverpool city centre. It's not there. And so your buy-to-lets, they've been working really well over the years there, have they, Rosie?
Yeah, absolutely. We've never had a void. That, and what we found with buy-to-lets over on the Wirral, a lot on our training, a lot of the buy-to-lets people were doing, they were talking about 150, 250 pounds a month cash flow. That's nothing. And I can understand why people don't want to get out of bed for £150 a month cash flow, especially if you've got maintenance issues. That quickly disappears in a month. So on the Wirral, we're finding £350, £450 a month cash flow. Our best buy-to-let is £450 a month cash flow. So that's profit. So it works for buy-to-lets. You get the good rentals. And we looked for HMOs to start with and thought, for an extra few £100s a month, it's not really worth the headache. The larger refurb, the tenant issues, all of that. So we steered clear from them.
That's very honest of you, Rosie. And on the large part, I can't disagree. I suppose, do you think that the examples of the single lets that you've been able to achieve, are you quite fortunate, or do you think actually there's still really good opportunity for single lets out there in the market?
I think there is. All of ours, we broke the rental ceiling. So where we've gone high end on our HMO, we've done that with our buy-to-lets as well. So we get that higher rent, we get and attract that better tenant who stays that bit longer because they've got a lovely home. There wasn't loads of these lovely buy-to-lets in the area.
So we're going to come on to your beast of a case study, and just to kind of get everybody warmed up a little bit. Top line numbers then. Purchase price, just a nudge over 170,000. Your all-in costs, which in fact you're really honest with me, before we kicked off. There was a lot in there, particularly with finance, planning, and we're going to get onto this detail, but just under 50,000. That includes stamp duty and things. And then your refurb was 210,000, so a massive refurb. And before I give away, the good stuff at the back end of that deal, you and I talked about private finance and how that has been a key part of your strategy. So how important has this been? And was it just this deal, Rosie, or have you been using and working with private finance and private investors for longer?
So we have worked with private investors since the start of our journey, not intentionally. We always wanted to do the first one ourselves, prove the system, so we could go and speak to investors. Unfortunately, our first buy-to-let, we had the mortgage valuer out, and we were quite naive. Had no gas central heating. We didn't realise that was a deal breaker. They came out, they zero valued the property, and we were a bit stuck because we did not have the money to buy it cash. So at that point, we'd already been talking to lots of people, telling them what we were doing. So at that point, we managed to get some friends to invest in us. And from there, we've used investors for every one of our deals. This one in particular, we had intended to use development finance. So they were going to a bridging company was going to fund 75% of the purchase and then 100% of the development, because they could see the numbers worked. I've until this point I hadn't worked with bridging lenders. I'm sure Andy, they ask for so much information. We were told that bridging finance was quick, um, quick and easy. Absolutely not. So I think maybe that was more the development side of things. Um, yeah, they wanted everything from us. And Alan at one point just threw his toys out of the pram and went, "Enough's enough. Let's just try and get this funded ourselves." And we did. We managed to fund every penny of it without having to go to a lender. So that was fantastic, and that really gave me the confidence going forward, because I was always a bit nervous that people aren't going to invest those big sums, surely, because all our little buy-to-lets in the northwest were sort of 40, 50, 60,000. That's a bit easier to raise finance for. We were looking for 360,000 for this.
Why do you think that people did want to invest, Rosie? Because I I completely understand that sentiment. Raising finance is quite a daunting thing to do. Why would people want to invest in me or my projects? Why would they not invest in someone else, in a better project? Imposter syndrome, perhaps. Why do you think people have been comfortable investing in you guys?
I think, well, firstly, they're not getting anything in the banks at the minute, are they? So that it's a fairly easy sell in that respect. But we have very much been good at telling people what we do from the beginning. We started on our social media very quickly, so people I think trust us because we show the good and the bad and the ugly. And it's not just about showing the wonderful numbers. Of course, the wonderful numbers are great, but what it takes to get there. We had the offer accepted on this HMO in May 2019. People went through that struggle with us, so they know it's not just easy. Anyone can do it. So I think that helps with the trust element.
I completely agree. I think it removes so much friction from the process, and nobody likes to be to be asked for money. Nobody likes to be put under pressure for, in those circumstances. But actually, by sharing your story and letting people in and letting people get to know you, you remove a huge amount of friction from the process, and it gives people the opportunity to develop an opinion, to develop that trust, like you say, and of course, in this example, learn a little bit more about the project without you having to hard sell them about the project at all. And one of the things I always see, Rosie, and I don't know if you've observed this, and I understand it, but people often spend some time on social media and then come off and back on and struggle with the consistency that it sort of needs. And social media is a bit of a fire hose now. Lots of people with projects, lots of people trying to raise finance, lots of people claiming to be experts and things like that in it. And it's a tough landscape to navigate these days. But it's difficult to be consistent on there. Were the times when you were using social media and you ever thought, I can't be bothered, what's the point? I'll just do it when I need to? Because I think you've got to be so committed to doing this, to have the foresight that, okay, you might not need the finance today, but we might need it next year or even in the year after. How do you find that process?
Yeah, I completely agree. So I really started ramping up our social media. I think it was 2019. For New Year, I decided I'm going to post on Instagram every day. And I pretty much all of that year did. I missed about 20 days, I think. But that was pretty good going. And that consistency really helped us build our following, our engagement. I haven't kept it up every day. I find that very difficult now. But yeah, what was the question, Andy? Am I going off on a tangent again?
No, not at all. I think you've kind of answered it, Rosie. Like, you found it tough to be there on it every day, but you obviously understood and recognised that it had a key role in building your business.
That's it. So at one point, Alan and I had a conversation. We're spending a lot of time doing this because writing the posts, it takes some time thinking of engaging content. Is this actually getting us anywhere? I actually enjoyed it. So that was part of the reason I carried on. And I'm so pleased I did, because from there, I mean, that's why I'm sitting here with you right now. Podcasts, we've been approached by a TV production company about following us in our property journey. I mean, all of that comes from social media, because if we hadn't put ourselves out there, we never would have had, well, people wouldn't know what we're doing. So yes, absolutely. an investment follows. And I think people need to be careful about just going on there to find investors, because if that's all you're there for, you're not going to do well. It's that network, it's building. I've met so many amazing people from Instagram, and the investment is secondary. So don't just go on there looking for investors. If you can build that network, and share your story, and that's it. It's documenting your journey. You can look back on that, unless your Instagram gets deleted, which I know yours did very briefly, didn't it? That's always the worry. But yes, it's something that you can look back and be proud of as well.
Definitely. I think just on that point of of losing your account. Now I still have no idea why that happened, and probably probably an error in the system somewhere. Certainly nothing that I've ever been aware of that I did, and I've never done anything on my social channels that kind of doesn't fit with their guidelines, buying followers and things like that. But I think it just goes to show. And it made me realize, actually, how exposed you are if you are only on one channel. Even it's very, very tough, and it's so difficult to see the value that being active on social media can bring, because it is so difficult. It's so difficult to get recognized. It's so easy to compare yourself to other people, which can be demotivating, demoralizing at points. The algorithms change all of a sudden, and it leaves you thinking, why is nobody all of a sudden interested in what I'm posting? That itself is part of the roller coaster of building a business now. And I think that anyone who wants to raise finance, unless you've got it in your immediate network, it's a massive opportunity, and for a lot of people like yourself and like us, it's a key priority. But I think it's important to kind of have your back covered and be on different channels as well, have different methods and resources of drawing on finance. And I think your point around going on there to provide, not being present simply to find investors, I think you're so right. I think if you do that, you'll actually end up repelling people. You'll do the exact opposite. And actually we see that all the time. As we're recording this now, a lot of news about inflation and interest rates, and I reckon I probably saw 50 posts from different people in the last week or two, just comparing soaring inflation, poor bank rates, come and invest with us. And I find it such a turn off. What I really enjoy on social media is seeing somebody go out and walk down the site, or somebody just jumping on the phone and tell me about what they've been up to today, because that is entertainment. That's engaging. It's not a sell, and that is so much easier to build that relationship with investors. But of course, it takes time and it takes patience. So for anyone listening who struggles with this, you are not alone. Rosie and I definitely find it. I know lots and lots of people do. And it's easy to sit here, isn't it, in retrospect, and say it's been so great on social media. But actually, when you're in the trenches and it's kind of mid-November and you think, I'm getting 10 likes on my post. What am I doing wrong? I can't be bothered. Everybody's looking at other stuff. It's really tough, but stick at it, find a way.
Yeah.
Because if you do want to raise finance, it'll definitely be incredibly valuable.
Exactly.
So let's have a chat about your case study then, Rosie.
Yeah.
This beast of a project. Can you tell us a little bit about the project?
Yeah. So as I say, we weren't interested in HMOs. So when this guy called, he'd actually checked us out, which was another interesting part when you say about people looking you up. He'd looked us up, found that he had a mutual friend with Allan, and had contacted him to check that we were legit. And and of course he again, another reason for doing social media, he was able to say, yeah, I've seen what they're doing, absolutely legit. So from there, he gave us a call. The property was split into 4 flats, huge building, 4 flats, and the council had just evicted the tenants because they deemed it unsafe. You had to walk through the ground floor flat to get to any of the other flats. So it wasn't fit for purpose. No fire regulations. It had been converted in the 70s, and I'm not sure how it had taken the council so long to pick up that this was not really a safe property. So they were quite desperate to get rid. They now had this empty property that they didn't know what to do with, that was in a pretty bad way. So obviously much bigger project than we used to. We had done a block of flats before, three buy-to-lets. So we were thinking, oh yeah, great, if we can make this work as flats somehow, that would be a few buy-to-lets in one go. So we went to have a view round, and couldn't figure out how to make it work as flats. The numbers didn't stack. The layout just didn't work. The staircase was right in the middle. If you'd have split it into more than 3 or 4, they would have been really tiny and cramped. And one thing we like doing is providing lovely homes, and not cramming rooms in, and small flats didn't really interest us. As I say, on the Wirral there's these lovely big Victorian buildings, so you could I mean, the flats that we've got sort of 70-80 meters squared. They're really nice big flats. We weren't so interested with the small stuff, so we looked at what else we could do with it. It was a fantastic building, beautiful building, and the only thing we could think of was an HMO. The current layout worked as an HMO. As I say, it was flats, but if you took a couple of doors out, it was just one building really, because they hadn't separated it properly. So that's what we started looking into, and we decided it could be a fantastic 12-bedroom HMO. So we decided to offer subject to planning. So we exchanged, mitigated our risk. We had no idea, having never done an HMO, never gone through a planning process. We weren't sure whether it was going to be accepted.
So did you offer subject to getting? I think it was initially a 12-bed HMO that you thought would work.
Yeah.
You didn't exchange before. It was simply just an offer.
I think we offered, and then we did a pre-planning app, and they said, yeah, all looks good. So then we exchanged, and so exchange subject to planning. Yeah.
So you'd actually exchange on the building. So actually, you were pretty committed without having the planning. Wow.
So we would only complete if we got the planning. So we exchanged subject to planning. So had we not got the planning, we would have got our money back. And we actually only exchanged with £2,000. So we'd very much mitigated all our risk. And the vendor was very good with us with that as well. He could see. I should note that the vendor actually lived next door, so it was within their interest for this property, for someone to do something nice with this property, and they could see that we really cared and wanted to work with them on it. So
great. So it all sounds brilliant. Big property. Wasn't going to quite work as flats or doing anything else, but had the potential to be. And I think this was 3.5. Was it 3,500 square feet or 3,000 square feet?
I don't work in feet. 340 meters squared.
Yeah, exactly. So a big property, bags of potential, good price by the sounds of it, and it all sounds brilliant, Rosie. So
yeah. Just to note, the value they had the building valued. They weren't going to let this go for less than it was worth, and it was valued at around 180,000. So we didn't actually get like a fantastic deal on it. It was more about what we came up with to get that end value. So what went wrong? Planning was an absolute nightmare. So as I say, we submitted plans for a 12-bedroom HMO, and the neighbours went mad. Not the attached neighbour, because of course the attached neighbour was the vendor, but we had so many objections from the local people, and it was just before we went into lockdown that we were supposed to get the decision, and they delayed it, and we were then told, we're going to go to committee. All good, we're off to committee, and we thought, okay, fair enough. Most HMOs of this size would go to committee in this area. So we were getting ready to go to committee, and then we get the refusal notice through, which our case officer at the council knew nothing about. So we thought that it must just have been knee-jerk, oh, COVID's here, we've got a reason to reject it, so let's just reject it. Their reasoning was because the attached neighbour it would affect their quality of life, basically.
Even though the attached neighbour was the seller?
Yeah, which was what was so infuriating. The whole process was to protect the neighbour, and all the neighbour wanted to do was to sell the house, which which they couldn't do unless we got planning. So it
Right.
was just this vicious circle of, oh, a nightmare.
And let's talk about architects for a moment. This is a big project. Definitely
Yeah.
needed, the consideration of an expert who knew floor plans and was able to measure it out and things. This was a problem for you, wasn't it?
Yes. So the architect, I because we weren't buying this property yet, and we weren't sure it was ever going to happen. I was reluctant to spend a lot of money on architect fees, which was a mistake. So I found this little architect on Gumtree, who I think worked for a firm but did his own stuff on the side. So yeah, he was not the best. I mean, to be fair to us, we did also get a planning consultant. So the planning consultant was doing all the planning side of things, and he just did the floor plans. And there wasn't we didn't want a huge amount of layout changings, so it wasn't awful, but lesson learned: go for a real architect.
Maybe don't shop for your architect on Gumtree.
Yeah,
Um, so this planning process, you were going in for 12 rooms.
yeah.
This planning process, how long were you stuck in this for?
So we completed on the property December. Sorry, yeah. Uh, Offer accepted May 2019, and then it was 20. When was COVID? 2020, just before lockdown. We got
Mm.
the it was 14 months, about 14 months.
So a long time just
Yeah,
trying to get this through,
yeah.
and ultimately you didn't get it, did you? You didn't get what you wanted.
No, so we appealed, and our reason for appealing was that we think we can do this anyway, without without planning, because we can do two 6-bed HMOs.
Yeah,
So that our planning consultant agreed with us. We'd come up with the
yeah.
plan, she'd agreed, and so we put this in our appeal, and they came back and said, no, we don't think you can. Refused again.
And so ultimately, what you've done with the property is it is now actually two 6-bed houses.
Exactly.
So, or flats, if you like. So you've got the 12 bedrooms.
Yeah.
And I think this is brilliant because I think this just says so much about the problem with the planning system, particularly with communities that have material objections to HMOs, or what
Yeah.
they believe to be material objections to HMOs. Technically, I would have agreed with you and would have assumed that you were correct, in that if there are no permitted restrictions on turning, a house to a HMO with the maximum number of 6 bedrooms, which is under sui generis, then there's very little that anyone can do to stop you. And I guess the question came down to whether or not you could get the council to approve you splitting the building into two dwellings. And is that essentially what you went back in for?
Exactly. So we didn't actually submit planning for that. We had so 4 flats. The top flat was the 2 floors, which was already 6 bedrooms. So that we could do what we wanted with. That could already be a 6 bedroom HMO. So we submitted a lawful development application to check that that was lawful on its own, 6 bedroom HMO, and they agreed that it was. So there we go, 6 bedroom HMO, no problems. We also submitted a lawful development application for amalgamating 3 flats into one. So that was the one we were not sure on, and that was the one that the planning inspector said, who was dealing with the appeal, said, I'm not sure you can do that. Now we'd got some literature that we'd found that people have done this, without planning. Can we do it? And that was the clinching point. And they came back and said, yes, that is lawful. So they allowed us to do the 12-bedroom HMO without giving us planning. But yeah, interesting system.
I'm kind of glad for you that you didn't do it as, one massive 12-bed, Rosie,
Yeah,
because that's a big HMO, and a lot to manage, a lot of risk, actually, different requirements from fire safety, and actually a lot more risk just from an investment point of view. You know, it's easy to control 6 people in one property. Controlling 12 people and everything that's going on in there is much more difficult. And I always think that HMOs of that size, you know, can very very quickly become youth hostel type of scenarios where there's a lack of responsibility from tenants, a lack of community, because there's very often gaps between the respect that tenants have for one another, and people get singled out, and groups forge, and it's really very difficult to build a community of tenants who really all get along. And actually, it's very easy for those relationships in there to fracture, and then you get problems. So,
Yeah.
for so many reasons, I'm really glad that you did this. But in retrospect, do you think this was the right way to go about it anyway?
Absolutely. I don't like to admit that, because it would have saved us 14 months of planning nightmare. But absolutely. And then COVID hit, of course, and people don't necessarily want to be living in a house with 12 people. 6 is a lot more manageable. And our letting agent, Nathan, he completely agrees. He says, I'm so pleased it's not 12 beds. I'm so pleased it's 2-6. But
Yeah.
that was our lack of experience. We've never done an HMO. We had visions of what we really wanted was no one living in the basement. We didn't want, I mean, it's not a basement, it's a lower ground, but we really wanted all the living space in the basement. We thought that was the way to go. So no, because I wouldn't be keen to be keen to have my bedroom in a basement. And actually, it's not about what I want. It's if there's a market for it, there's a market for it. So yeah, it's not getting too hung up on what you feel is best. What does the market dictate?
So, skipping, onto the good bit then.
Yeah.
It's a project that's actually worked incredibly well. Numbers are amazing. So, net cash flow after all cost, 2,500. I mean, talk about return on capital, return on initial investment. I mean, you got all of it out and then some. You ticked all those boxes. And really enjoyed you saying this, but your manager, who you mentioned, is Nathan, who's someone I know incredibly well.
Yeah.
And you said that Nathan does an incredible job of managing it. And actually, from your point of view, Rosie, this is a fairly hands-off investment now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our current buy-to-let letting agent was very keen to take this on. He'd never done an HMO before, and I was very much not keen on that, because this is my first HMO. I need someone to hold my hand. I don't need to be holding someone's hand. So I put it out there to Instagram and said, does anyone have not recommendations? How would you go about finding a letting agent? Questions you'd be asking. And it was actually Ava Lily Kelly from Instagram who came back and said, I think Nathan's in your area. He's setting up this business. He might be worth contacting. And I did. And he has very much made my life amazing, because I thought it was going to be so many headaches. And don't get me wrong, there's still a few headaches, and we're still having a few teething problems, because this was only let out August, September time. So obviously taking a building back to brick, nobody's lived in it for a couple of years, there's always going to be those teething problems. So I think it's been a few headaches for Nathan as well. But we're getting there, and it's just I just don't need to think about it, which is exactly what I wanted and why we do buy-to-lets.
Well, I think this begs the question, Rosie. I'm dying to ask you. You've gone through the mill with this, and I can understand why, if you had ultimately not got to where you wanted to get, you'd probably dump the idea of HMOs altogether. But actually, you've got a very profitable project. You've got it really well managed now. Cash flow's fantastic. It's equivalent to the average salary, really. But you said you're not actively buying more HMOs. And to me, this screams, this is exactly why you should. This is what's brilliant about it. So what is it about HMOs or the process, or maybe it's just your strategy and what you and Allan want to do? Why aren't you actively looking at more HMOs?
So as I said, we were never looking at HMOs. They're more of a headache in terms of the refurb, everything. I'm not after something to give me loads of headaches. And yes, of course, it was a fantastic project. It landed on our laps finding another one of these, I don't think we'll ever find one as good as this, ever. It's just been, of course, all the headaches, but I think to find, we're not looking in the northwest anymore either. We're focusing our efforts in the southeast. Finding something you can pull your money out of. We were having this conversation before we started. Finding something you can pull your money out of in the southeast, where we live. There's an Article 4 area. I think it's, maybe I'm just a bit lazy. I think it's going to be too hard.
Well, before we kicked off, before we hit record, I did describe myself as being a little
Well,
bit lazy.
yeah, you did.
I don't like to do massive projects all the time. It's hard work. It's stressful.
Yeah.
There's a lot of risk involved. Sometimes just settling for a little bit less, if actually it gives you a few less headaches, doesn't give you sleepless nights, allows you to focus on other things, which for me is building my other businesses as well. That's okay for me, and raising recycling capital out of them, but it suits me and all of my businesses and my overall objectives. So I totally hear you.
Yeah, I will never say never, Andy. Maybe, but it would have to be a really good deal, I think. I'm not about to sit and plonk a load of money in when I think I can probably plonk money elsewhere, which is a bit less hassle.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to whatever you do next, Rosie. And what's the plan? What's the immediate plan then? What are you guys thinking about doing next?
So at the moment, we've got 2 deals in conveyancing. One is a mixed use building. It's got a convenience store and a barber's on the bottom, commercial, and then 2 flats above. It's a stone's throw from Canterbury Cathedral, so we're going to turn those 2 units into serviced accommodation. But it's a bit of a longer term. We've had to adjust our strategy where we usually try and pull out as much money as possible. That's more of a 2-year refinance in 2 years rather than our usual sort of 6 months as soon as we can. We're also in the process of buying a new home. We've done, where we are now was a doer wrapper. We bought that a couple of years ago. We've now finished it. We've made good money on it. So moving on to the next one. So those are the 2 deals in the pipeline. Still looking for other things. Market's tough, but hopefully something else soon.
Market is very, very tough at the minute, but
Yeah.
there's still stuff out there, and I think the future looks really, really, really bright. And I think while things are a little bit more expensive at the minute and it's competitive, I think we can probably expect, all the signals seem to be that, prices are going to continue moving upwards over the next year or two. So, I still think there's bags of potential. Are these projects, Rosie, things that investors, any of our listeners might be able to get involved with? And are you looking for, investment partners on these deals as well?
Yeah, I mean, always looking for more investment. Because of the sorts of deals we're doing, previously we've offered silly interest. The silly interest is gone. The market doesn't allow for it at the minute. But yeah, absolutely, always looking for investors. This current one is fully funded, but we're hoping the next one is just around the corner.
So I've got one last question for you, Rosie.
Yes.
I said I wouldn't put you on the spot about anything, but now I'm going to put you on the spot. But it'll be an easy one for you because you've been doing this for a while. If you could impart one piece of advice to anybody who wanted to build a property business, whether it was HMOs, single lets, small development stuff, rent, whatever it is, what one piece of advice would you share with anyone, I suppose, based on your experience of building your business so far?
I think going back to the consistency piece, no matter what you're doing, you need to be consistent, whether that's on social media, whether that's viewings, whether that's direct vendor, whether that's whatever it is, you've got to be consistent. Otherwise, even if it's just a few hours each week, if you can be consistent a few hours each week, you're busy with the day job, the compound effect, that will all add up and make a huge difference. I'm going to say one more thing as well, because I know you wanted one, but 2, tell everyone what you do. You never know. That's my go-to at the start of your journey. People think, oh, I want to wait until I've got one under my belt, so I've got some success. That's not the time to tell people. Tell people from the beginning. They will support you through it. You never know who you're going to need to help you, whether that's friends, family. You never know who's got money as well. But that's a huge one. Tell everyone, and also it forces you to do it. We didn't get our
It holds you
first.
to account, doesn't it? If you
Exactly.
tell people.
Exactly. We didn't get our first offer accepted for 9 months. I could have given up. I told everyone what we were doing. I was a property investor. So I couldn't. I needed to save face. So yeah, huge one. Tell people.
Couldn't agree more, Rosie. Two brilliant pieces of advice. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. Where's the best place for any of our listeners to catch up with you if they are keen to maybe learn more about Arch Investments, maybe working with you, or maybe aren't following you and just want to come and have a nosy and check out what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Instagram's the big one. We're Arch Investments on Instagram. You can find us under that tag on all the channels, LinkedIn, Facebook. We've got our website as well. But Instagram's the one where we're most active.
There you go. And of course, Rosie and Allan's case study, this big project will be inside the roadmap, all there, lots of before and after pictures. It's a fantastic case study, very, very inspirational, very, very honest as well. And we'll put all of your information and link people to you as well. But yeah, just want to say another massive thank you, Rose. It's been an absolute pleasure to come on the show. It was definitely worth waiting for, and I'm super excited to see what you do next. I'm still quietly hoping that there are more HMOs in the pipeline because you're clearly, very good at it. But yeah, big thank you for coming on the show, sharing your story and talking to us about this great project.
Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.